All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is Friday. It is August 16th, 2024. This is a Income Navigator meeting. I like to call these You've Got Options because you have options. And today we're going to talk about two things primarily. I want to address number one. I want to show you what I am doing with 1x bear traps. I'm pretty sure that you still remember just a couple of weeks ago, we were slapping on these trades, 112s, 113s, and whatnot, and everything was great until end of or the beginning of August, really, where volatility spiked, and not just that. Technically, the market had disappeared, and a lot of positions were being kind of held in a place where we had no market to make adjustments and or to exit our trades. So therefore, we have one of two ways we can go about this. We can pretend it didn't happen, or trading is it's a process, right? It's a forever evolving kind of a business where you always have to tweak some things. You need to adapt new practice. You need to put in new rules and I would say, you need to adapt different tools if you want to continue to succeed long term. I'm pretty sure that we are all in the same boat, some better off than others. We did take a drawdown, and this is a setback. The goal is now to figure out what went wrong, what we could have done differently, and move forward, keeping all of that in mind, and figure out what are we going to change about what we have been doing going forward, so that if something like this was to happen again, and it probably will, I'm not here to scare anybody out of the market, but whether you want to or not, things like this can and may happen again. So when and if it does happen again, we should be ready and maybe not have as much exposure if possible. And if we do, going back, looking at what took place, and what we could have done differently, we're going to need to take all of that information with us forward and just be better next time. I went back and I looked at all sorts of different potential adjustments that could have been done, and a lot of different scenarios that I was looking at all kind of lead me to the same um, outcome or same thought, is that I could have done this, or I could have done that, or maybe I could have done this only if I had a market to do it in, right? If we have no market, if the bid ask gets blown out, it's 300 points wide for a $4,500 underlying or $4,500 notional. You have a bid ask spread that's 400 points wide. There is no market. No, I don't really see any reason why this market should stay open at that point, because I mean, if you want me to do business where if I needed to cover something, I have to buy it back for 300, or if I wanted to initiate a new position because I didn't, use up all of my buying power and so on, and I can't get into a new position because the highest bid is $2. And for those that need to buy to cover, the lowest ask is $300. Um, we can't do business that way. So a lot of things that I look at, I could have done differently. I could have done this and I could have done that. But the problem is that there was no market to do it. And we need to figure out how to maybe have less exposure next time out, or what we might need to do ahead of time when there are certain warning signs, and take necessary steps before it's too late. I am no different than anybody else. I had 4 positions that went 4x of what their stop should have been, only because there was no market to exit. And even though I did have hedges in place that did have, and they helped, reduce some of the losses. And remember, I kept on saying, and I will continue to say this going forward, that just because you have a hedge, it does not mean that this hedge is going to help you offset all of your losses. Maybe it will, but odds are, if that is the case, then you're holding on to a hedge and you're maybe overhedged all of the time, which is, look, if that's how you want to do your business, that's fine, right? But most of the time, if you have some sort of protection on, it's not going to solve all of your problems, but it will help you reduce some of the losses that you will have to take if you are stepping out of your positions when market is going against you. So some hedges did help, not enough. I've learned a bunch about different hedges, how, because you actually get to see what is happening and how these hedges perform during the times like August 5th. And now we also, um, I guess we can figure out what worked, what didn't, right? Some of the things I thought were going to work great didn't do as great as I thought they should have done. So maybe I need to make some tweaks to my hedging. But with all that said, I did have 4 positions that went 4x beyond their stop. So if my stop was 6,000, losses were between 20 and $24,000. It's going to take some time to get out of this setback, but show goes on, and we just need to learn the lesson and try to get better going forward. That's as much as I am going to say about what took place. And now I am going to show you the one trade that I did do today was in ES. This is not a 1-1-2, but it's a 1-1-1. And I think the difference between 1-1-2 and a 1-1-1, except for the obvious, right? There's less naked puts on the downside, right? So you don't have as much gamma and you don't have as much vega. Because remember, like right now, we're all super sensitive to volatility and volatility this and volatility that. And we're talking about hedging and this, that, and the other. But again, in a normal market, right, where implied volatility doesn't get blown out, where the market is 300 points wide, where volatility rises and then volatility falls, right? This trade shouldn't get killed by any spike in implied volatility. Again, I want to emphasize the word shouldn't. Does it mean that it's never going to? No, right? As we saw that, crazy things can happen, and we just need to keep that in mind. But most of the time, a trade like this will either get under serious pressure early on in the trade due to implied volatility. But then as the time passes, right, volatility will decay. Yes, Vega does decay. There is a second order Greek that speaks to us about the rate of decay of Vega and Delta, right? These will decay over time, over price, and over volatility. So as the time goes and the implied odds of something crazy happening starts to go down, right? All of these Greeks will start to matter less. And the only one that really starts to matter is the gamma, right? This is the rate of change of this T plus 0 line on the downside, right? How we measure the curvature of this T plus 0 line. So in the end, or towards the end of the life cycle of this trade, what matters most is your directional exposure. Implied volatility it shouldn't hurt you as much later on, right? So early on in this trade, where volatility matters more and directional doesn't matter as much, at some point towards the end of the life cycle of this trade, that relationship is going to flip, where volatility is going to matter less and your directional exposure is going to matter more, right? So removing one of the two of the naked puts will definitely help us early on in this trade. And what I did do, right? And Tom had a number of videos out highlighting of what he is doing, and I think he is doing an outstanding job making necessary changes to his trading strategies. And I want to also point out that this is not, black and white, right and wrong. You can do whatever you want. You can trade however you want, whatever helps you, whatever makes you better, whatever helps you sleep better at night, whatever it is, right? You have to make changes that make most sense to you. And then you have to do this trade time in and time out again. And then you have to monitor your results. And then based on the outcome, you need to maybe shift and do something different about your input. But remember, consistent input should result in consistent output. Good, bad, or indifferent, you have to try to do the same trade, same exact way, manage the trade same exact way. And then based on your results, you could decide whether you're doing it right or whether you need to make some sort of changes. So what I'm doing here, I am not going to move the put debit spread anywhere. I actually want to play this trade, right, for the trap profit. Moving this put debit spread further out of the money will reduce the cost of this trade, or um, it will increase the potential tail profit, which is a great thing, right? But it's also going to give us a lot more initial positive delta. And that's not really my goal here. So what is my goal here? For this trade, I want to keep put debit spread the way it was, or maybe even move it a little bit closer, because I want to increase my chances of the price being somewhere inside of the trap. And I'll tell you why. The reason why I want to do it is because since I am removing one of my naked puts and I have only one naked put instead of two, I'm not taking as much credit up front. What that means is that I need the price to end up somewhere in the trap at least a couple of times over the next couple of months in order to potentially make up for smaller credit up front. I hope that makes sense, right? So now I am moving or keeping my put debit spread right around where it was, or maybe moving it a little bit closer to at the money, which means I am increasing, this, I guess, the width of the bear trap, right? Or the trap area, which means I am increasing the probability of price being inside, or probability of this put debit spread going in the money at expiration. You could think about it like this. If before I had this put debit spread, which was maybe delta 20, right? I'm just putting numbers on it just to hopefully make this a little bit easier for you to understand. We know that a delta 20 has an implied probability of being in the money of 20%, which means 80% of the time, this put debit spread was going to expire out of the money. Now, if I move this put debit spread from where it's delta 20 to delta 40, right? I now have a 40% probability, not 20, but 40% probability of this put debit spread being out of the money. And there's a 60% chance of this put spread being in the money, right? So by keeping it where it was or moving it closer to at the money, I am potentially increasing the odds of price being somewhere inside of the bear trap. And this is where we make the bonus, right? Inside the bear trap, we have potentially our put debit spread will be worth its max value, which is the difference between the two strikes. Plus, if we have the naked put expire out of the money, we get to keep all of that premium. So this is where we make the most profit inside the trap. So what I am doing before, if let's say if I bought this put debit spread for, let's say, $12, right? So it's a 50 wide for $12. I would go and I would look for a put that is trading for about $12, and I would sell two of these, which means the first naked put would cover the cost of this put debit spread, and the second $12 that I'm collecting for this put would give me a net credit of $600, because I'm using ES in this example, and ES has a multiplier of 50. So if I spend $12 for this put debit spread, and then I collected $24 for my two naked puts, before I would have a net credit of $600. So now if I'm spending 12 for the put debit spread, instead of selling 2 naked puts at 12, I'm going to sell 1 naked put, and I'm going to move a little bit closer to at the money, which means I'm taking a little bit more risk. So I'm selling this spread. I'm selling this naked put not for $24. I'm looking for maybe 15 or 16 bucks. Right. So what I am doing is I am moving my naked puts a little bit closer towards where the price is trading today, which means I'm going to collect a little bit more than what I would collect for it before when I would sell 2 of these. And I'm replacing, instead of doing 2 naked puts, I'm only doing 1. Right. So, and I still have, you know, um, much less of a tail profit because I'm not taking in as much credit, but my T plus 0 is a little bit smoother on the downside. And if things get a little crazy, we don't have as much vega because, again, we don't have as many naked puts all pounding us at the same time. Right. So this is kind of a hedging or risk management mechanism within this trade on its own. And if things really get out of whack, I think the best, based on the information that I've read in our community, and I spoke with a number of members here, and I think that one thing that has worked the best were very near-term out-of-the-money puts. If you were able to buy them early enough, those were the most effective as a hedge for volatility getting out of control. So, yes, there's still risk of this thing going, you know, against you due to volatility, just like we saw a couple of weeks ago. And if that happens, I think that I'm going to use some really, really short dated options to possibly flatten out my T plus 0, but it's not so much T plus 0 because T plus 0 just tells me about my directional exposure. To measure how volatility will affect this T plus 0, when volatility rises, T plus 0 line is just going to go down way below the 0 line, right? So 0 line is the 0 P&L line. If maybe I can show you, if we take volatility up, I don't know, 80 points, right? You can see my T plus 0. I could still be where I am today, right? But as you can see, I took volatility up drastically, and you can see where my T plus 0 line is, right? So the price didn't really move much, but a big spike in implied volatility pushes the T plus 0 line down to where I am now, right? In losses of excess of $50,000. So the reason why I think that using near-term or very short-dated options worked best is we recently did not have a massive push lower. We just had a massive push down in our T plus 0 line. So if we can use out of the money puts, very short dated, just to kind of hold our accounts together and hold our buying power from going negative and forcing us out of our positions. At least that's what I think was happening to most people, is that they were forced to cover at the worst possible time. And they didn't cover because they were scared, or maybe some were, but I think most people were covering because their buying power went negative. There isn't really much you can do. There's no market to turn your buying power back to positive by buying short-term puts. So you had no choice but to close positions at the worst possible time. So if there is a market for very short-dated puts, I think that's the way I would hedge this position. But for the most part, the trade setup is still the same. It's a 50-point wide put debit spread and 1 naked put, but closer at the money. Closer to where it still produces a net credit to the upside. And then, right, this trade is 91 days until expiration. in a normal market, right, we would expect some kind of a call this a hump buildup. It doesn't really happen. We don't see it too often because the way implied volatility or the way volatility moves between closer at the money options and far out of the money options. Closer at the money options get hit harder than those that are farther out of the money. So we don't necessarily, get the hump. But the idea is once enough time passes where a significant risk to our naked put is decreasing, I think that what I'm going to do with this trade in order to compensate for smaller initial credit, I'm going to look to roll. I'm going to look to roll parts of the put debit spread. I'm going to decrease the width of this spread and potentially bringing a little bit more credit to this trade, increasing my tail profit. And then if the market is going to revert and trade back to the downside, hopefully we are going to be able to capture price somewhere inside of the trap area. And right now, it does not look like there are a lot of strikes available in the November. This is what, November 15th expiration cycle in the ES with 91 days. Only 25-point wide strikes available. But I think that as we get closer, like if we look at 60 DTE, I think that, yeah, once you get into like the 56, 60, 65, 63 DTE, I think there are more strikes available. So we would be able to roll maybe roll the 5400, which is the short strike of the put debit spread, roll it up 10 points, bring in a little bit of credit. Yes, that may increase buying power requirement just slightly, but I don't think it's going to be significant. And we are going to potentially increase our um, tail profit to where it makes sense to continue to do these trades. Now, again, I'm going to monitor how this trade works, how this trade is going to produce over the next, 2, 3, 6 months. And if there are better ideas, if there are some things that I can change about this trade, yes, of course, I'm going to bringing whatever changes that need to be brought. But I also think that, with a trade like this, we're talking about a very basic setup, and the number of contracts here is two, right? It's a 2, 2, 2. Um, it all depends on, your situation and your account size, risk tolerance, and so on. But you don't have to do a 2, 2, 2, right? You can do a I don't know, uh, a 4, 3, whatever here, where on as far as the naked puts go, where you're still collecting a tail profit and you're keeping your T plus zero line relatively flat, right? You can use all sorts of different combination of um, numbers of contracts to where the trade makes sense to you. You just have to keep in mind that if you're taking a very small initial credit, if you just hold this trade for the next 91 days and the price is just going to go to, let's say, 6,300, you can't make any more than what you take in initially. So it's up to you if you're going to do something, right, to increase your tail profit, either selling more puts naked if you have the appetite, maybe removing some of your put debit spreads, whatever is going to be a net credit transaction, that is your answer. Right. So if you want to increase your tail risk, if you want to increase your tail profit, then you will need to look for some sort of net credit transaction in order to increase your tail profit. I'm just looking over some questions. And that's pretty much it. I mean, as far as this trade setup, it's nothing new. We've beat this horse many times before. It's just, making a slight change to this. Let's see how this works. And, if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll look for something else that works. But we are going to keep the conversation going so that, if you have some ideas, do not be shy. Bring this up. And, we have many members that are advanced, and we can talk about theory versus what it would be like in real life. And maybe together we are going to be able to mold something that is going to be a lot more stable during the times when implied volatility bites us in the ass. I'm just going to look at some of the questions, and I hope that we are on topic of this 111. um Yes, Craig saying Sunday, Monday pricing was not real. 100 agree with. I agree. I couldn't agree more. And we had this conversation very briefly with a few other members where, do we need some sort of uh, circuit breakers in the option markets? Um, I can make the argument for both yes and no. I don't think we need circuit breakers because look, option markets is a risk market. This is where you go to transfer risk. So if the market is crashing, if the actual market is crashing, right, you need to have the risk market open so that you can transfer the risk of what's happening in the market. And the option market is that market. It needs to stay open. They need to keep it open. However, when the bid ask spread for these options gets blown out, there is no market. So then why is it open? Do you want me to do business on a 2 by 300 bid ask spread? I can't do it. So then what's the point? So I'm not sure what or if they're going to do anything, but yes, the pricing was just not real. The market maker firms, computers, algos, whoever was doing this, they have no idea what the fair price was. They were just jacking IV way up. Just are they there to hurt anybody? No, they did not know what the appropriate implied volatility was because remember the price for an option is based on implied volatility mostly. So if you don't know what the implied volatility is in at any given time, or especially in that time, if you don't know what IV is, then how do you know what the price should be? Right? If you have a major component of the pricing model missing, well, there is no price. So yes, the price was not real. It was just crazy. Dirk saying so gamma is the slope of the T plus zero. Gamma just tells us about how delta is going to change over price. But yes, in other words, if you're looking at at my screen here, so at 5100, you can look at the delta of 11.76 and gamma of minus 0.04. We go down 100 points, and technically, right, my delta should have increased by whatever gamma was times 100. And now I have new delta of 16, right? Before it was 12. Now it's 16, so it increased by about 4. And now for the next 100 points, gamma is now 5, which means it moved down another 100 points. My delta is not going to increase by 4, but it's going to increase by 5. So if we move to 4900, now my delta is 21. Now my gamma is still 0.05, and then but the point is the lower we go, and you can see the gamma continues to increase. It went to 0.06, and then it goes 0.07, and as gamma increases, so is the rate of change of delta increases. Right? This is where we die in the last couple of weeks in this trade because implied volatility doesn't matter as much. It's all going to be about your delta, and delta is driven by gamma. And the more negative gamma you have, the faster your delta is going to increase. So that's how that works. I'm not sure what Craig is implying, but also reduce the likelihood of hitting the trap. Mm, can you demonstrate how adding those puts would change the T per zero compared to what you just showed? So let's just assume that this trade I have on in the 91 DTE and the market is going, well, not the market going down, but implied volatility is going through the roof. Well, I know that I have one naked put, so maybe going to like a 14 DTE, and let's see what that would look like. Uh, 21, 19, 14. So let's see what a, but again, we're looking at it right now. There is a market, right? There is a market. So we can say, what's my directional exposure here is nothing, right? Um, okay. We're not trying to cover for directional exposure. We can maybe try to cover for our Vega. So you say, okay, my Vega, let's say, is a 205. And then here, I'm going to switch to show me what the Vegas are in these puts that are 14 DTE. So now I know that I have one short put at 4,500. Let's say I wanted to buy 3 long puts for every one short put that I have, right? And it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 2, anything more than one, right? Like you want to have net long positions when the market is falling out of bed. So you can, how do you decide which put to buy? You buy one at the money? Maybe, but they can be expensive. Do we buy something way far out of the money? Yeah, probably. So if I said, you know what, I'm going to buy 3 puts, but which puts? Well, what am I trying to accomplish? Maybe I want to remove all of my Vega. So let's say my Vega is 203. Let's say I wanted to remove 180 of that 200 Vega. So 180. Now I think to get to 180 Vega, I will need to go and look for puts that have 60 Vega, right? So if I buy 3 of these, it's not a pretty looking graph, and we may be overpaying some. Overpaying, I wish I could show you guys. Overpaying because, if things recover, right, there's a dip here, and then we go to August. Let's just assume we bought 3 of these 5100s, right? And then the market settled the hell down, and then we moved the way we have moved in the last 3 weeks, or since August 5th, 2 weeks. Well, what do we just do? We just spend on these 5,100 calls all of our tail profit here. Well, that sucks, right? Yeah, it does. But guess what it also do? If things were going to get a lot worse, look at our T plus 0. Instead of diving down and forcing us out of a trade, this is our bridge between when things are going the way they were going on the night of, August 4th to August 5th to where they were just a couple of days later. Right? So that's the idea. If we can take our Vega and figure out how to cut it to almost flat, you don't have to go flat. Maybe we just bought, instead of 3, maybe we bought 2 of these. Right? You don't have to overbuy, assuming there is a market and you can actually put the trade in. Right? When things settle back in, this put that we're buying 5,100 with 14 DTE, on a hard bounce, this put is going to collapse so hard, there will be nothing there. Right? And then the market runs away. Well, now we have a problem. What's our problem? Our problem is that we spent almost all of our tail profit. Well, okay, I guess we're going to have to not make money here, or we can, figure out maybe we are going to move this put debit spread someplace. Maybe we move it farther out of the money, collect the credits. Now we need to work on doing the opposite. To bring in these 14 DTE puts, this was a debit. Okay. We wasted that on our hedge. Okay. Now what? Now we need to work on bringing in a credit to compensate for it. How are we going to do it? We can move the put debit spread farther out of the money, collect the credit. We can sell more naked puts, right? We're taking on more risk. But all these ideas are going to produce a net credit, which is going to restore our potential tail profit. So these are some of the ideas that I have for the next time out, and these are going to be different. And one thing you will notice about, how me and Tom operate, he's more of a systems guy. He wants to put things in place, and which is great. You can take your hands off the wheel for a little bit, and it's good. What your trade's supposed to achieve, and your job is just to monitor to make sure that they're hitting their um, designed or their outlined targets. I'm a little bit different, and trades like this, they require a little bit more paying attention to. They require a little bit more incremental adjustments. Like if I'm spending during the times when market's starting to move and there are warning signs flashing, I'm going to spend something on the hedge, and if that doesn't work out, that's fine. Now I know I spend something on the hedge. Now my job is to figure out the least suckiest way to compensate and bring in a credit to cover for what I just spent on the hedge. Right. I hope that makes sense. And if you are a little confused about what I just talked about, looking at the Vega and figuring out how to buy what to buy, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Maybe we won't have the time to do it today, but if you put that out there in our Discord, I guarantee that we could create a topic and talk about this. And then this is the reason why we have our community, so that we can, not just say hello, good morning, and goodbye, but we could also actually talk about, things like this, so that we all know what to do next time something happens. So yeah, Glenn, I hope this helps you understand as far as what bringing in shorter DTE puts how that will change the T+0 and what that looks like in the software, at least what I'm using. Mark saying, if you're looking to get into a trap, would a 100 wide put debit spread be better, or does that reduce tail credit? Yes. So going between 100 wide and 50 wide has a direct relationship with the amount of credit you're collecting, right? We know that a 100-point wide put debit spread is going to be a little bit more of a debit, which means it's going to reduce the amount of tail profit. So what you can do is you can settle for less money up front, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or you can also, if you're doing, instead of 50 wide, if you're doing 100 wide and you're spending more money on your put debit spread, then if you don't want to give up any of the tail profit, then you will just have to either increase the number of naked puts. And if that doesn't sit well with you, then you will just need to move your one naked put closer to money to collect a higher dollar amount to compensate for the higher debit that you're paying for the 100-point wide put debit spread. Next question. Any benefit to having a shorter DTE on the put debit spread? Put debit spreads benefit is always later in the trade. Well, yes, and I also have been looking at doing trades where, let's say we're short naked puts, 90 DTE, and we're long put debit spreads, 45 DTE or something like that. The only difference is that if we spend X on the put debit spread at 45 DTE and the market doesn't move, and then it moves in the second 45 DTE, and we no longer have that put debit spread, now what? Right? So we're going to, and so, my thinking is like this, right? Let's say I spend $12 here on this put debit spread at 91 DTE. Why don't I spend 6 on the first 45 DTE put debit spread, and then spend $6 on the second 45 DTE? The only thing that I don't like about that is that, if a $12 put debit spread is right here, a $6 debit put debit spread is going to be very far out of the money. I don't think it's going to help us much because it's too far out of the money. And if the market really starts to move down, even though this put debit spread technically should gain, I think that the closer you move your put debit spreads to your naked puts, they're going to start to offset each other, and we really aren't going to reap the reward of the put debit spread. So there are some things that I like about the idea. I just don't know if I'm 100% sold on it. Another idea is instead of doing a put debit spread, um, doing some kind of a put diagonal, right? Where and we also get some technically we should get some positive vega, but it's a lot of moving parts, and I'm still doing a bunch of different looking back what if scenarios in Option Explorer. So I will be, bringing things that I think make sense and worth looking into deeper. So there's definitely going to be some fresh ideas, and hopefully, we'll figure out how to improve and make this trade a little bit better. Uh, David says, what about a 2-2-3? Let's see, 2-2-3. So let's just say, I put this trade on today, so not much has changed. So this is a 2-2, and on the naked put, instead of going 4, we go 3. Sure, why not? Right. So we'll add one more. Okay. What is the difference here? Well, the difference is we get a little bit more directionally involved in a trade like this, right? Right now, a 1-1-1 or a 2-2-2 has a delta of 0.81, which is pretty much delta neutral. Having an extra 1 naked put will increase directional risk a little bit. It definitely increases theta from 37 to 56, and it also gives you a little bit more negative vega. So you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. It's not a terrible idea if this fits within your goal for the trade, or maybe instead of doing 3 at 4,500, you push them further out. I just don't like the idea of um, increasing number of naked puts and pushing them further out of the money, because the number of puts is what was the problem when volatility blew out last time, right? So if unless we're completely expecting for something like this to never happen again, then it makes sense. But if there is a risk of something like this happening again, and your goal, if you're trying to get to a place where you don't have as much notional risk in your positions, I think I would rather have less naked puts, but play closer at the money. Let's see what else. How does 1-1-2-2 change the two? So I'm gonna I went on with this 1-1-1 a little bit longer than I planned, but no big deal. We'll talk about a 1-1-2-2 next. Have you looked at the money back ratio spreads to add at no cost or small debit? Um, yes, and if I understand the question correctly, these back ratios, they do like something like this, right? Something at the money. So for example, I think what you're asking about is selling something closer at the money and buying, um, let's just look at something like this, right? If the market is starting to go down, but more importantly, volatility is starting to explode, we can say, all right, I'm going to sell the 56.25. I'll sell one of these. I'm collecting $145 for it. And if we divide 145 by 3, that means we can buy 3 puts further out of the money for about 48 to $50. What do we have for 48 to 50 bucks? 48, this is 49. So let's just call it this, right? We're going to buy 3 of these, right? So something like this, which is not terrible, right? Again, why? Why is it not terrible? It's not terrible because look at our T plus zero, right? It's pointing higher, which means that if volatility really, let's just take it up, I don't know, maybe 40 points, right? I don't know if this is exactly how it's going to work, but if we just took volatility up 40 points, look at the T plus zero, right? It's way above zero line. So, mission sort of accomplished. The problem here is that, and this is using the same expiration in 91 DTE, we can probably do something um, with shorter duration, which will probably be a lot more responsive in the event that volatility markets blow up again. The problem for me here is this sea of death, right? What we saw in the last couple of weeks, I went back and I looked at last couple of times, and really last couple of times were um, Feb 2018 and COVID, which is March, April of 2020. Before that, it was August 2015. Those were all not fun times. But I don't think that even in the last two times that volatility went from, whatever we were in the teens, VIX went to 65 and it's back into the teens like 2 weeks later, right? So um, my biggest concern here is that if we put something like this in place and volatility does not get completely crushed, but we actually get lower volatility, and this volatility expansion comes with a move to the downside, we can slide very fast into this area where this P&L at expiration does not look so great. And now imagine if, and I'll show you what that might potentially look like. Look at this. I'm taking volatility down just a couple of points. You see how the T plus zero starts to fall? And imagine if we go, well, I don't know, 2 weeks into the future, right? And now we're here. Say we moved down to 5,500 over the next 2 weeks and volatility came down just a little bit. Man, now we're in a very tough situation, right? So the hedge, the way it looks or the way it was supposed to work, it works when volatility goes up 40 points. If volatility falls, 10 points and price comes down, now we're sitting in a ditch that, we need to figure out how to get out of. I hope this makes sense too. If it doesn't, it's okay. But um, we can possibly. I mean, I think that these back ratios, instead of at the money, doing something farther out of the money, it works. But that sea of death is really what's not sitting well with me. Um, I think Eddie, and I think that I would prefer to just buy plain vanilla puts, very short DT, kind of the same uh, thinking of what I went through earlier just now. Look at your Vega, figure out how much Vega you need to eliminate on any given trade. Go with 7 DT, 10 DT, 14 DT. Go as far out of the money as you can, and just remove that Vega. Again, this is just a bridge, right? And the reason why I would use 14 DTE is because, all right, we'll buy 14 DTE thinking that this volatility will subside in the next couple of weeks. I don't expect this, to make money. I don't want this to make money. So I know that I'm going to spend something to just keep my buying power from going negative and forcing me to close the way it happened. And then once volatility comes back down, and if for those of you that paid attention, you might have noticed that between Monday and Tuesday, you didn't have to close everything, but buying power just went, it skyrocketed because volatility came down, right? So we're looking to buy some, closer to expiration out of the money puts just to keep our buying power from going negative and forcing us, or worse, forcing your broker to act. David says, "Do I trade LT11X as campaign? I'm trading all of my 11X. I start at about 90 days, 91 days, and I work them down to, I don't know, maybe 70 something days until the next 90 days is available. And I just keep adding them. Trades that I got blown out of were all recent trades. They were all, I don't know, 90 to about 70 something DT. And then I have a number of trades that are expiring in the next couple of weeks. Well, they were kind of under pressure, but they were nowhere near because again, like I said, volatility doesn't matter as much when you have very little time until expiration. We live and die by delta in the last couple of weeks before expiration. But early on in the trade, it's all Vega. And especially when, um, you know, Vega goes or VIX or VIX future contract, anything that goes up 100%, trades that are most recent are going to be the most sensitive to changes in implied volatility, and trades that are pretty mature, they are going to take less heat. All right, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So that's my idea for the 1-1x, right? Reduce number of short puts, keep the put debit spread at the same. I'm looking for a 50 wide if I can get uh, $10 to $12, maybe $15, right? It's not a bad place. I don't look at delta. I don't care about delta, right? Because during times of high volatility, if I'm looking for a 50-point wide put debit spread for $15, when volatility is high, this put debit spread is going to be further out of the money. When volatility is low, the same 50 wide for $15 debit is going to be closer at the money. So I don't care about the delta as much, and delta is just going to follow, right? So I don't want people to focus as much on delta. Oh, you said 28. Why are you doing 29 delta? Like it's nonsense. If I say I'm buying a 50-point wide for $15, guess what? There could be several of these depending on what strikes are available. In ES, for example, right now, there's only 25-point wide strikes. So it's either 54.50, 5400, or it's 54.25, 53.75. It's one of these two. Does it matter which one? No. Right? Whatever you can get filled, it's close enough. All right. So now let's talk about the 1-1-2-2. And this is the OG bear trap. This trade we've done many, many moons ago. And this is a trade from which the 1-1-2 was actually born. Give me 1 second and all right, I hope y'all can see this. And this is a trade that I put on 3 days ago. So if you want to go back and kind of look at it, it's a trade number 2933. Basically, the idea here is instead of doing a 1-1-2, we're just doing a 1-1-2-2, right? So we have defined risk. And all we're doing here is just playing with the widths of these spreads. This is a put debit spread, and this is a put credit spread. Putting them together gives us a structure that is similar looking to a 1-1-2, except this one has a little bit less Vega risk. But there are also, right, having less Vega risk is the positive. And for every positive, there's always something negative. Like if you're gaining something, you have to give up something for it. If you're giving something, you have to be getting something in return. So in this trade, right, having defined risk, which is great, much better than having naked puts, for those that swore off on naked puts and never look to doing anything naked again. Having defined risk is great, but in order to build a structure that makes sense, at least for me, well, now my put debit spreads have to be further out of the money. You see this put debit spread is 8 or 9% out of the money right now. Whereas we look at the trade that we were just talking about, the 1-1-1, right? We have a naked put, but the put debit spread is much closer. It's like maybe 2 or 3% out of the money. So with a put debit spread that's 8% out of the money, we have a lower implied probability of this put debit spread going in the money at expiration, which means there's a higher probability that we're going to end up somewhere outside of the structure or the bear trap, which means that we're more likely to just keep whatever we collect up front. So the reason why I think this works, and this isn't the trade that we put on and just forget about it, right? Because I took in the trade. So this is a 100-point wide put credit spread, and I did 2 of these put credit spreads. And I bought one 50-point wide put debit spread, and I collected a 35-cent credit for this trade, which means that I could only, the most I could make on the upside here is $35 per one contract. Now, I did 10 of these, so let's just go over the numbers real quick. This trade was put on 3 days ago. The underlying has moved 1.6, right? 1.5 standard deviations to the upside. You can see we were here, and now we're all the way up here. This is a 10 lot, so this is a 10, 10, 20, 20. The max potential reward on the upside is $350. Now, if you do this trade in a Reg T account, you have to put up about $150,000. But if you did this trade in a portfolio margin account, the original buying power requirement for this trade was 27,000. 27,000 versus 150 in Reg T, right? Let's do very simple math. What if we divide 150 by 27? About 5.5 to 1 leverage we get. Now, buying power can and will increase if the market starts going down. So we always have to keep that in mind. We don't want to leverage this trade, right, all the way to, where we have no room for the buying power to expand. But the buying power shouldn't expand as much because portfolio margin, they look at plus minus 15% mark, and that's what they want you to put up as your margin. Now, if we move 10% to the downside, right, portfolio margin is going to look at plus minus 15% from the new spot where the price is, and whatever your, right, like this this trade required $27,000 initial buying power. If we move from where we are right now down to about, I don't know, let's call this 5,200, right? From 5,200, if we look at a down slice of minus 15%, so 5,200 times 0.85, now we're at 44.20. What's 44.20? 44.20 is right here. The buying power will probably go, or buying power requirement for this trade will probably go somewhere about 40,000. So we would go from 27 to 40. So I think that buying power change here is different than in a span margin account. It doesn't escalate because we don't have the naked put, so the risk isn't as great. So in any case, we are using leverage here. But I think it's a smart way of using leverage, right? So I don't want people to like write angry emails to me saying, I have a Reg T account and this thing is showing me $150,000, initial. Yes, in the Reg T account, you will have to put up, if you want to do a 10 lot, $150,000 or $15,000 per one of these tranches. And the only way to get around that, if you want to use leverage, you have to have a portfolio margin account where your initial buying power will be much lower. And now this trade actually makes sense. Even though we have a put debit spread that's pretty far out of the money, it's 8%, right? It's 8%, it's 8% out of the money. We have 91 days to do something about this trade. What are we going to do? Right? We can sit and do nothing and make $35 on $2,700 margin if that's all our broker is going to ask us for. If we do simple math, it's 1.3% over 90 days. It's terrible, right? That's not what we're here for. But as the time goes, right, 2 days have or 3 days have gone by, and you can see that now this trade is showing about a gain of $500 on a 10 lot or $400. Right, that's because the difference in DK, right? So the put debit spread is losing money with every passing day, and so is the put credit spread. But the put credit spread is, number one, it's wider, and there's two of them for every one of these put debit spreads. So technically, this gain came from decrease in prices of both the put debit spread and the put credit spread, except put credit spread has lost more than the put debit spread. And since we're short the credit spread, we get a net positive unrealized gain in this trade right now. So the goal, the general idea of this, at some point in the future, my focus here is to bringing additional credit. I don't want to settle for the initial 35-cent credit. I'm going to try to bring in additional credit. And what am I going to do? I can do one of maybe three things. I can sell more credit spreads that are far out of the money. Maybe something like sell 5 of the 4,800 and buy 5 of the 4,700. Right. So I just gave up some of this potential in the trap that I wasn't planning on making to begin with. Right. I definitely increased my buying power requirement right now if I did that. But I also have increased my tail profit. This spread is currently going for 370. So what's 370 times 5? It's about $1,850. Right? So if we fix that at 370, and now we look at, right, my potential reward went from 350 to about $2,225. So I just did this one move, right? I didn't do it, but I'm proposing doing one move here, adding another put credit spread to bringing additional credit, and I increased my tail profit. So now the price could run up, and I do nothing else. Instead of making $350, I'll make 2,200 and whatever. Right. And if buying power didn't increase drastically, so maybe buying power went up to, from 27 to 30,000. Okay. And let's say that's all we are going to have to put up is 30K. If I make 2,200 on 30,000, that's 7% over 91 days times 365 days. Now, this trade has an annualized rate of return of close to 30%. It's not 3% per month. It's not 5% per month. It's not 10% a month. But you get the idea. You get to decide what you do with this trade, when you do whatever you're doing, and how your adjustments, incremental adjustments, are going to lead to your desired outcomes. So that's one idea, right? We can sell a put credit spread that's far out of the money. We can also shrink the size of this debit spread. So maybe we'll buy back 10 of the 50/50s and then we'll sell 10 of the 50/75s. Very similar. We're bringing in $200 per one, and we're doing 10 of these. So we're increasing our tail by about $2,000 here. All right. So we went from having the max potential reward in the tail of $350 by selling 10 of these. Essentially, what they are put credit spreads because I'm selling higher strike, I'm buying lower strike, right? And I'm bringing in $200 for each one of these. I'm doing 10 of them. I'm increasing my tail by about $2,000. So my tail profit went from 350 to about 2,400. And my margin requirement for this trade probably went to about 30,000. And if that does not increase from there on, if I make 2,400 on a $30,000 buying requirement, buying power requirement, that's 8% over 91 days times 365 days. That's an annualized rate of return of about 32%, right? That's another idea. And a third and final idea, how else can I bring in a credit here? Maybe, just maybe, and I don't think this is a my favorite. How about I just remove 10 of these? Oops. Maybe too much. How about just 5? Eh. I mean, this is going to increase buying power requirement a lot more, but we're also, we increased the tail from $350 to almost $7,000. Right. So if you have the $1 million plus portfolio margin account, these are some of the ideas I am talking to you. Right. If you could handle the dollar risk, there's definitely some ideas that, and you can do this later on in the trade. Maybe you'll wait for this 44.50 to lose half of its value and you start to undefine risk here, right? Increase your tail, undefined risk here. But you got to be aware, that, things could turn on a dime and you need to have some sort of a plan in mind as to what to do if things go sideways. Now, before I mentioned undefying this um, spread, what I really had in mind was how about selling a call credit spread, right? Nobody brought that up yet. How about if you are sitting here and you tell me, well, you know what? I'm watching the price all day, moving average, Fibonacci's, all that good stuff. I could possibly time the market here. Good. If you can time the market, awesome. How about this? If you think the market has, topped out here, we're going to potentially run out of steam and roll over. How about selling a 5,900 59.50. I mean, that doesn't have to be 50 points. It could be 25 points. It could be 10 points. It could whatever you want points. How about that? This does not take up any more additional buying power because remember, oh, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Because portfolio margin looks up and down 15%, and it will require you to put up whichever is greater. So here, if we go up 15%, the buying power requirement is probably going to go over 30,000 compared to minus 15% on the downside. So yes, the broker will ask you for more money, right? Somewhere close to maybe 35, 37,000, right? But look at your tail profit. It went from $350 to $10,000, which means now you introduced upside risk. You drastically reduced your profit potential, not profit potential, probability of profit, right? Because now, if before, right, you had, close to 100% chance of success in this trade by reducing or by introducing upside risk, right? Now you took your implied odds down to about 88%. Still fairly high probability of success trade, but now you have to worry about both upside and downside. Right. So there's um, definitely ways to manage this trade. Definitely. And the good thing is we have 91 days to do it. And this trade is very forgiving in the first at least 30 days, right? The market could swing up and down. We shouldn't technically get hurt. Yes, we are short Vega. If volatility explodes, it's not going to be fun. But if things are normal, there's so many different adjustments that we can explore. And we haven't even talked about doing some kind of calendar spreads here and turning this into God knows what. Just very simple. Our main objective, our goal is to increase our tail profit. How we're going to do it, we can sell put credit spreads farther out of the money, closer out of the money, or sell call credit spreads closer at the money, farther out of the money. This is all discretionary. It's all up to you. And I am here to help you to learn how to not just look and think about this trade, how to possibly model this trade, figure out where you're trying to get to, and look at different possible adjustments to get to where you want to go and to find the path of least resistance of getting there. All right. So these are two things that I wanted to talk about. I am going to have to cut out here and I have to run and get my daughter from camp. Um, I think that I gave you enough to think about, and I hope you think about this. And I also hope that you have follow-up questions, because if you have questions, we most certainly have answers. And I am going to stop.